Good morning. I'm so honored and a little overwhelmed to stand before you today to make the ask. But I do it for my children who saw a lot less of me this past week as they took time to prepare. As you just heard from Greg, this is our moment to turn the enormous opposition to fossil fuels in our own backyard and in our ports into opportunity. An opportunity to build a thriving, sustainable region that supports healthy communities for ourselves, our children, and the generations to come. But it requires enormous effort, new partnerships, and a recognition that protecting our environment and confronting social and racial injustice are interlinked. Just like my kids, I was born in Seattle. As a kid, my dad would take me to summer festivals where we'd volunteer at a booth, educating our broader community about the importance of recycling. At home, we focused our conservation of energy, water, and money by turning off lights, wearing sweaters, not overflushing, and harvesting bath and rainwater for our plants. As a Mexican immigrant, my dad grew up working as a farm worker in segregated Texas. At age 14, filled with rage about mistreatments he felt powerless to change, he left his family to follow the crops, ending up in Oregon's Willamette Valley, where he stayed. Because for the first time, he felt treated as a human being. Eventually, he ended up in Seattle, landing a union job at a glass bottling factory in Georgetown. The union job allowed my dad to not only overcome a history of racial segregation, uneducation, and poverty, it also gave him an opportunity to become a leader in his workplace and his community. But since both my parents moved far away from their families, what summer meant was road trips to visit relatives. And on the way, we would stop through the redwoods, those amazing, magical trees, or the red rocks of Bryce Canyon. My brothers and I were awful on that trip. We complained the whole time. But looking back, I am so grateful that my parents took us there. Then we would arrive in southern Texas for pig roasts and piñatas with my aunts and my cousins, as a crop duster would spray pesticides in the field just in front of us. Next, we would cross the border to Reynosa, Mexico, to visit my other aunt. Aunt Moggy lived in a two-room house with a corrugated metal roof and dirt floors. She shared a common courtyard and an outhouse with her neighbors. And she had to buy water because her drinking water was contaminated. Almost every time we visited, my aunts would send another 13 or 14-year-old cousin back to Seattle with us so they could go to high school in Seattle. There were so few opportunities back home, but we couldn't bring them all. Later, as a college student, I read the autobiography of Cesar Chavez and the farm worker movement. It led me back to Oregon, where I met a teenager named Efrain Peña. Just like my dad, he left his family to work in the fields of Oregon. He worked at night, applying pesticides to hop vines. And in the morning, he found dead birds. Why so many dead birds, he wondered. Who killed them? The more senior coworkers replied, "You did. Those birds nest in the hop vines." Ephraim and his crew had no safety protections and no equipment to protect themselves. Why, 40 years later, did Ephraim have to relive my father's story? As I learned, it was because we allowed agricultural workers and most service economy workers to be excluded from basic labor standards and human rights, with detrimental impacts to our natural environment. A horrible legacy of our America's slave economy, the very economy from which our fossil-fueled economy was born. That is why, for me, protecting our environment and advancing social and racial justice are one and the same. That is why solving the climate crisis centers on understanding that people of color, immigrants, and refugees are first and worst impacted by climate change. And it requires a commitment to climate solutions that cap carbon, reduce pollution, and result in direct benefits for our frontline communities. Winning climate solutions requires building stronger, deeper, more diverse partnerships to confront the powerfully overfunded opposition to our more clean and just economy.